The search for extraterrestrial intelligence represents humanity's quest to find signs of life beyond Earth.
So everything that you see today got to the ends of the tree of life is the lucky 1%.
If you're curious about SETI or ever wondered what a whale might have in common with an alien, you've come to the right place. Welcome to Whales and Aliens, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence in the Salish Sea. I'm your host, Lisa Walker. What if we had a time machine capable of carrying us millions of years into the past, to a Salish Sea alive with creatures almost beyond imagination? A coastline shaped by ancient oceans, giant marine reptiles, and ecosystems that wrote the earliest chapters of life in this region. In this episode, I'm honored to welcome Pat Trask, Curator of Natural History at the Courtney and District Museum, where he leads fossil research, field discovery, and public interpretation of the prehistoric marine world that once filled these waters. Through decades of work in the field, he has helped uncover the deep evolutionary history that underpins the modern Salish Sea. And that brings us to the question everyone wonders when they hear about his discoveries. How does a journey like this even begin?
What brought me to that? Just a chance discovery by a dad and his daughter looking for fossils on the river one day. And it turned out to be the first elasmosaur found west of the Canadian Rockies. The oldest one on the west coast of North America, and very complete in respect in fossilization. It is about 80% complete. But that guy turned out to be my twin brother and his daughter. And so that's what brought me here. It was my twin brother's discovery, and his discovery changed my life. I was working in industry at the time. I was a cub leader and a firefighter and a bunch of things, and the guys were always telling me I was spinning my wheels in industry. I should have been doing something more in my life. And my brother phoned me one day and said, "You know, Pat, we just dug that elasmosaur up." That was back in 1991. He said, "You know, I have my 15 minutes of fame. It's a flash in the pan." He said, "Why don't you quit your job and get involved with this? You'd be on the ground floor to get involved." And I said, "Well, I have a job. I'm making money." He said, "This might be something different in your life." And so I agreed to quit my job. I went to the personnel manager and said, "I'm leaving in like a couple of weeks." "Oh, what are you going to do?" "I'm going to go hunt dinosaurs." And I thought I was crazy. And I never looked back. It's been an exciting ride for the last 33 years for me now. And from that decision to move to the island, to Vancouver Island, and I got a part-time job, and I started volunteering at the museum. I presented a business plan to do fossil tours because I started learning about the fossils. I didn't have a job. I got to go fossil collecting every day. But my brother introduced me to all these scientists, and they became my mentors. And so it became a great learning experience for me for the last 30 plus years, from like very little knowledge, but a keen interest in science and the outdoors especially. And that's where the fossil collecting takes place, in the outdoors, in that beautiful place we call British Columbia. And Vancouver Island has this wonderful fossil bed that extends for about 150 kilometers. People don't realize how big that fossil bed is. It's an ancient seafloor. At the time of the dinosaurs, Vancouver Island was underwater. It was this big sort of underwater island. But as that island moved north on the Pacific Plate, a lot of things happened to it. Sedimentation on top of it, some volcanism on top, as it moved along, probably from below the equator up to its present position. During the late Cretaceous, underwater, we just kind of showed up and hit North America. And off the coast were these sea monsters swimming and dying and sinking to the seafloor, getting buried in the mud. But because of plate tectonics and the Juan de Fuca plate subducting under Vancouver Island, it's now pushing Vancouver Island up out of the sea. So as that big rock comes up, it brings the ancient seafloor on top of it up with it. Then glaciation, took it down to what we see today. But right under the forest and right under the sand and gravel left by the glaciers, there's this intact ancient ocean from about 80 to 85 million years ago. And in it are the creatures of the day. And it's just a wonderful thing. We're finding new species all the time. It's added to the sum of human knowledge for sure. I think at least 20 or more, maybe 30 new scientific papers have been written since that discovery. But that discovery back in 1988 was the catalyst for all the recent discovery that's happening now. Because there was a group of volunteers that helped dig that thing up. It wasn't that easy. It's not like Alberta with a brush and it's not like that. Our sedimentation was fairly high. We probably had a kilometer of mud on top of it, and it squished it into a rock, into shale. So it's hammers and chisels, rock saws, jackhammers. Those are the types of equipment and a lot of like sweat to excavate these animals along the river. But the museum got involved and a bunch of volunteers were rallied, about 40 volunteers to dig that animal up. But after they dug it up, everybody was interested in fossils. Our whole community got interested in fossils. And so the people that were involved with that dig, they decided that maybe we should form a group of like-minded amateur scientists. From that grew the Vancouver Island Paleontological Society. So many times now, people have come up to me and said, I went on your fossil tour a couple times when I was a kid, and now I have a PhD in archaeology, or I'm a geologist, right? Or, a biologist, because of that spark. And that's all it takes is let them see what it is by doing hands-on. So my tours that I do is like hammers, chisels, goggles, and everybody has that chance to discover. And people find some fantastic things. I tell them you can keep what you find unless you find something I think is, significant to science. It could be like a real shiny thing, a beautiful fossil. But if I know its name, I know it's been studied. And so that fossil is not going to do me that much for the museum in its collection, but I know what it does for that person, that child, to take that fossil home with them. And they will reiterate everything that I told them all day long 1,000 times. Because they'll tell everybody, they'll be so proud of that ammonite or whatever it is that found a shark's tooth. Last summer, this kid, it's amazing. I said, I didn't have a hammer in my hand. I said, could you dig that little round mud ball out? It's called a concretion. Could you dig that out for me? So he digs it out. He hands it to me. It's about 11, I guess. Hands it to me. And I go, oh, there's an elasmosaurus tooth in there. Oh, so he grabs it out of my hand and goes running off. And then tells everybody found an elasmosaurus. Now, I could have demanded it back. I could have. I know where he is. I know he's just down island. I think he's told everybody that he knows, and everybody that he knows told somebody else that he found an elasmosaurus tooth in the Trent River. But what that did for him and for science is, it's uncalculable. You can't calculate what that does, that spark. It leads that child on to do something else in their life. It gets them off of their whatever Game Boy or whatever they're doing. I try to encourage the people on my tours to come back with their families and come back and keep going and do it. And all the time I see people on the river, hey, Pat, look what we found today. We went on your tour a couple years ago. We've been doing this every weekend. And it's a family thing now. These people are out there, mom, dad, kids, grandma, grandpas, together with their families, and they're doing something that they can do together. And that child and that parent has the same amount of information at the same time. You open that rock, you look inside, you see a fossil in there. Your eye is the first human eye to ever see that organism. That thing hasn't seen the light of day for 85 million years. It could be something new. It could be. And then the child might say, hey, do you know what this is? Or the parent might say, hey, do you know what this is? What do you think this is? And together they collaborate and try and think about what kind of organism it was. And so they have to flip through all the organisms in the world and try and figure out what's it related to. Or what is this thing? We find out all the time, what the heck? What is that? After, 85 million years and being an organism that might have soft parts, they don't usually fossilize at all, just the hard parts. So you're guessing quite often. And a lot of those organisms that have soft bodies will never be, we just won't find their bodies. We just have to guess. It's, it's a hit and miss sometimes. But the fossil record on Vancouver Island, the chemistry was just right. It was just right for organisms to be fossilized. And sometimes it's like too acidic or it's the other way, and they rot away. Because parts of the river, there'll be like no fossils. And you go, why isn't there anything living in this time period right here? But then, a half a kilometer down the river, it's just full of things. Certain fossils are very specific to time. So the timeline usually in the world is based on the creatures that live in it, of course. And the ammonites are one of them. They're called the index fossil. So ammonites are like an octopus that lived in a shell, similar to the nautilus of today. Nautilus is here, but the ammonites all went at the end of the Cretaceous with 65% of everything else. But they had a worldwide distribution and they had a lot of mutation through time. And so there's a whole bunch of different ornamentation on their shells. But some of them were like the evolution, like let's say the mutation is an instant thing. So sometimes the shells will be, they all basically were coiled on a single plane called planospiral with an octopus sticking out of there. But sometimes there's a mutation, and say you have like 500 babies all at the same time, and they all have the same mutation, right? But the mutation is not the little baby. The octopus guy is just fine. It's the way the shell's wrap. It starts to go this way, but then it goes like that, and it uncoils. So now you have a whole new species, like, and genus, because they don't look like their mom at all. If there's just one little bump or a different ripple on their shell, it's a new species. But if it's like totally doesn't look like mom, but because evolution is a series of genetic mutations followed by natural selection, mom had 200 million years of evolution to look like that. So she's very efficient in the water with her jet, going backwards in the water because she can evade predation. But that guy with the open coil is going to be slow. He doesn't have any hydrodynamics. And so the predators can leave it alone for a while because he's never seen it before. It's like, I'm not eating that. It might be poisonous. I've never seen it before, right? Because it's never been there. It's not in his little genetic memory as on the food triangle. Not in there. But then one of them eats one and goes, hey, how was it? Not bad. Next thing you know, anybody die? Nope. Next thing you know, they eat them all. And they go extinct. But because of that, that little creature, that fossil itself, becomes a marker in time. So say you find an elasmosaur and you say to the scientist, how old is this elasmosaur? Well, what kind of ammonites did you find when you were digging it up? Oh, we found these 3 different types. Oh, well, that one lived between here and here. That one lived between here and here. Oh, that one lived right there. So confirmed by 3 ammonites at the time. So the ammonites they're used worldwide as little claw. They tell time. And the faunal zones, they're named after the ammonites quite often, right? Polytychosaurus zone, right? Or the Elkhornensis zone, because of they're just found at that certain point. It's a great understanding. It's bigger than just that fossil itself.
Mm-hmm.
It's the geologic record. It's the and all that paleontological record to go with it. But trying to put it into context and trying to understand it, like our little pea brain in millions and millions and billions of years, and then that's just our little cosmos here. But life's been on this planet pretty well ever since it cooled off. It began right away. As soon as it cooled, we have fossils going back to like 3.8 billion. That's not long after getting hit by something and our world turning back into a liquid ball again after it, made a moon. That was a pretty violent thing. But then shortly after that, life began. But it came in the comets, it came in the meteorites, it came those precursors. So that means they're out there and they're flying around. I'm not saying that we've been visited, but I always say to the kids, you know what I really want to find? Buried in this Puntledge River is a spaceship. And the kids are like, what? I said, no. See, we always think the timeline's going to be the same, right? Of us thinking about, flying in the universe compared to an alien's timeline, which was billions of years earlier. And so they would be way ahead. But you're not going to find a ship with like creatures inside. It'll be robots. It'll be, some probe that they shot, And then they get to the planet, they go, hey, let's go see what it's like. And then they land in the water because, 70% of the planet's water. So chances you're going to get the water is pretty high. We just got out of the trees, Really? 200,000 years ago, we've kind of stayed up, That's not very long ago. This brain is full of empty space, human brain. It's like there's a whole bunch of filing cabinets that got nothing in it. We're only using like that much of the neurons. There'll still be a day. It's just collectively, right? As a human species, if we keep sharing information, that's all we have to do is keep sharing, sharing, sharing. And then somebody comes up with an aha. It happens because it connect the dots. That's what education's all about. That's why science is important. Some people think it's not important. They're just worried about their like normal day life. But that's boring. They're going to find all these fossil people, cats, and dogs. Because we're the first animals to bury our families and bury our pets. And they're all going to be complete. Nobody ate these guys. Nobody ate these things. Nobody liked them. It's going to be weird that they'll find all of these of us, and hardly any other animals. Because the fossil record will be different. There'll be the asphalt layer full of, diapers and milk jugs. So they're first described as a snake spreaded through a turtle's body. Turtle-shaped body, 4 flippers, fairly short tail. First time they ever found one, it was in Kansas. And the scientists actually put it together wrong. He put it together first. He put the head on the tail. But they called that one Elasmosaur us. I think it was Platypyrus. Once they found this creature, it was the first one they'd ever seen these long neck things before. They thought, well, we need a family name for this type of animal. So they called them Elasmosaur, from the family Elasmosauridae. So everyone that has a long-necked, turtle-shaped body is called Elasmosaur. But the one my brother found, they didn't name it. They were reluctant to name it because it was the only one they really had for study. It sat on the seafloor quite a while, so the bones were kind of like corroded on the edges from microorganisms and seawater beating on them for a long time. The scientists were quite sure that it's probably new, probably a new genus, new species for sure. But as I said, they were reluctant to name it. And in 2020, I found another one on my tour. So it actually started with a lady on my tour. She found a finger bone. And that was 4 years before that. She found a little finger bone laying in the water. I said, I'd like to keep that as diagnostic. Maybe it came out of this cliff, but maybe it came from upstream because I thought it's waterborne, so it probably did come down the river. I said, I'd like to keep it as diagnostic. I'm glad I did because the next year, one of the dads on the tour came up with a little hockey puck. And it was like a metatarsal, like a wrist bone. That turned out to be an ankle bone. But I go, oh, you know what? It came out of that cliff right there because I found a finger bone. Somebody found a finger bone last year. Now this wrist bone, that tells me there's something in that cliff right there, and it's waving at us because his fingers are falling out. It was like a 100-foot cliff. And so I kept on the trail. I kept looking, couldn't spot it. Found some pieces downstream. Had a guy with a drone, had a guy with a rope. We couldn't spot it. And one day I got there with the family. I said, "Hey, let's go look for a baby elasmosaur," because I knew it was a juvenile because I'd found a femur downstream and it was smaller than the full size one. I knew it was a baby one. And then there was a tailbone laying there. I go, "Oh, I wasn't here yesterday because I looked. Because I looked every day. I'd go there. I'd look, see if there's any bones that fell out of the cliff." I came back that night with my telescope and I looked straight up that evening and I could see it up there. It was 35 feet up the cliff. And I got the Vancouver Island Paleontological Society guys to help me and we built a platform. And I spent 2 months up there. It was my pandemic summer. And I got like a 60% complete little baby elasmosaur. Not a baby, it would have been about maybe 3 to 4 meters in length. It's full size, but his body was like 2 meters in length, but it was all there pretty well. Nobody ate it. All the bones that were left in the cliff were still there. But because of that, between the two specimens, the scientists could actually name it. Scientists came from West Virginia. I was introduced by a scientist that I know from the University of Alberta, and Mike Caldwell. He introduced me to a guy named Robin O'Keefe, Dr. O'Keefe from Marshall University, one of the top elasmosaur specialists in North America, apparently. And he flew out right away and photographed, measured, and then started a scientific paper. Months and months and months. A couple of years later, a couple of authors at the University of Washington, an author in Peru, a Canadian, and Robin. And between us, it's now called Traskosaurus sandrae. It's not, it would have been Elasmosaur us if it was male. For some reason, he thought, because he named the species after his mom. Her name was Sandra O'Keefe. So that's why it's Traskosaurus sandrae. Now, if it would have been a male name at the end, it would have been Traskosaurus, but he wanted to make it female, so it's Traskosaura. It's an honor to have that named after my family. Now, I'll just show you my shirt. I don't know if you can see it too. Many, many moons ago, our group, the British Columbia Paleontological Alliance, approached the government and asked if we could have a provincial fossil. Now, the province of British Columbia has a natural history symbols list, a bird, a flower, a tree, and things like that. So we have the dogwood, we have the Western red cedar, we have the Steller's jay, we have jade as our rock, we have the spirit bear as our mammal, and we have the Pacific salmon as our fish. In 2023, October, our elasmosaur became the provincial fossil of British Columbia. That's on the official symbols list. That's like the biggest thing that could ever happen to this animal. Not just get named after your family. That's kind of cool. But the big thing is the provincial fossil. That was big. And so we worked on that for a long time. I was the biggest fan club it had. And our community, we're lucky, we have this wonderful community. So I'm a big green elasmosaur in the parades. I've been that big guy, like a character for like 30 years. So I've endeared the elasmosaur to the community. Every child has been on a fossil tour. Every parent, it seems like. All the schools bring their kids. And so they see, what we're doing with, that fossil. So we have a full reconstruction of the elasmosaur hanging from the ceiling, Traskosaura. And we have the full body laying out in a display case beside it. And then we have the juveniles on display. We also find mosasaurs. Mosasaurs look like giant alligators. So there's all of this we're finding. And I really found the first articulated dinosaur on the west coast of Canada. That hadn't even been announced yet. I'm still waiting for the scientific paper, but he was down at the river putting a blanket down for his wife to read a book. And there was like 20 bones laying there, sticking out of the rock. And they're first identified as another tail of an elasmosaur, but recently described by Dr. David Evans from the Royal Ontario Museum as the tail of a duckbill. Just 300 meters or 200 meters past that spot, there was a couple of turtles found. One was a marine turtle, but the other one turned out to be a freshwater turtle. So And then right across from where those tailbones my brother found, the duck-billed dinosaur, is where the baby elasmosaur came from. So within a couple hundred meters of each other, there's two turtles, a dinosaur, and a marine reptile. In the tree of life, 98% of everything that's ever evolved went extinct. 99%. So everything that you see today got to the ends of the tree of life, got to the tops of the branches. All of the creatures that live right now is the lucky 1%. Yeah, that's it. No, we're lucky that we got to be this stand-up form. Just through a bunch of extinctions of other things. And then when the dinosaurs disappeared at the end of the Cretaceous, the mammals took over. Because then they didn't have a constraint because they didn't have anything eating them. There weren't any browsers, there weren't any things like that. So the world just got really, really awesome, around 50 million years ago in the Eocene. They say where British Columbia is now, well, where Cache Creek is, they say the biodiversity there was about the same as Costa Rica today with the bugs, things like that. But that's the time when the whales evolved. Because the mammals, they were small, hiding under bushes. And they're omnivorous, they were pretty smart. They were hairy, furry, could hibernate, all of those things that they needed. But once the dinosaurs disappeared, those mammals came out and they're going, hey, this isn't such a bad place after all. And they took over. And they got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then some of them went into the water because there wasn't nothing in there to eat yet. Some fishes and stuff, but that's it. No giants. So that's where the whale came in. Yeah. And then from that open niche, and 30 or 65 million years later, 66, from a mammal the size of a mouse or a rat, that's as big as we were, maybe a house cat, was the biggest mammal left. Now we have a blue whale. Evolution is awesome. They were like a walking whale for a while, in and out, and then they had legs for a while, but now they don't. They got those front flippers, but the back, oh man, they just have a little pelvic structure back there. There's no tail. It's just weird. We had like a juvenile orca skeleton on display, and I had a sign, guess who I am? Because if you just found a whale in the fossil record and not knowing what a whale looked like, you wouldn't come up with a whale. It's weird. They got this giant head, looks like an alligator. They have a short neck, just a 7 vertebral neck like us. Then they have this barrel-shaped rib cage. Then they have these 2 front flippers with 5 fingers each. And then the tail just goes right to a point. There's no fluke or nothing, and a little vestige of their back legs, but nothing that looks like back legs. And you say to somebody, reconstruct what that animal looked like while it was alive. You wouldn't come up with a whale. You wouldn't. We're really fortunate where we live. We live in a paradise on Vancouver Island, and you're in the wilderness within 5 minutes, right? And you can be there by yourself. And so we have this sort of sense of everything's okay because it's still beautiful, and so we're kind of lucky that way. That you can just sort of feel that you're one with nature at that moment. You're not fighting it, right? You're trying to fit in. That's what it's all about. Trying to fit in, because everything's connected. And we know that. We know that the bees are missing. We know that the bugs are dying. We know, and those things are really important to making other things grow. We need that pollination. We need all of that. We can't do ourselves. We need all of that. We can see it happening, and it's like freaking me out. I don't want to freak out too much, but I can just see it. Like, You used to have bugs all over your window on your car, but never have to scrape your car again. Never. I don't have to. Ever. Ugh. Yeah. Here we are. Maybe we can learn from the whales. Life will struggle through. It will. And it's tenaciousness. And I'm glad it's tenacious because it's been kicked back so many times on the scale. The 5 extinctions. And at the end, the Permian extinction was 95% of all life. And from that little 5% came everything. And then it was kicked back again and again. But here we are. And we can see the future. I think we're one of the only species that can see the future. Because we have a past, we have a history that we understand. And you can't predict the future without a past. That's why I tell everybody all the time, why do we study paleontologists? It's about ourselves. We're the one asking the question, where are we going? How did we get here? What were the steps? Look at all the things that went wrong. So we have to learn from that because it's for our existence, is to learn from the fossil record, from the past, from our history. Because that's all we have. That's the only way you can predict. Is from looking back. And when you look back, you can see forward. It's the only way you can do it.